Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to speak directly to those of you who felt the sting of rejection and still found the strength to stay silent. This isn't just about heartbreak. It's about rediscovering your worth in the quiet that follows. When someone walks away, the instinct is often to chase, to seek answers, to prove your value. But what if I told you that your silence, your calm absence, is the most powerful response you can give? In this talk, we're going to explore how your silence after his rejection isn't weakness. It's the beginning of your transformation and his realization. You know, there's this moment after rejection that most people never talk about. The moment after the goodbye, after the silence kicks in, after the door quietly closes behind you. And it's in that moment that something incredibly powerful happens. Your silence becomes louder than anything you could have said. Because silence isn't just the absence of words. It's the presence of control. It's the presence of strength. When someone rejects you and you walk away without trying to fix it, without begging for clarity, without desperately holding on, you're not losing power, you're reclaiming it. He expected something different from you. He expected you to chase him. He thought you'd send those late-night messages, trying to convince him he made a mistake. He thought you'd stay visible on his radar, proving your worth, making him feel like the center of your world. And when that didn't happen, when your phone didn't light up with apologies or questions, when he saw you go dark, not because you're playing games, but because you chose yourself, it started to hit him. You see, your silence is a form of communication that speaks directly to his ego. It forces him to ask questions he never planned on. Why isn't she reaching out? Was I wrong? Did I misread her value? That silence disrupts the narrative he had built around you. He thought he held the power when he rejected you, but he never imagined you'd actually disappear, not out of weakness, but because you decided that your peace mattered more than proximity to someone who couldn't see your worth. And that silence, it's not empty. It's filled with meaning. It tells him that your presence was a privilege, that being in your life came with access, and that access has now been revoked. That realization, it stings. Because what people often miss is this: rejection feels like control in the moment, but true control lies in how the other person responds. And you, by choosing silence, by refusing to argue for your value, showed him something he never expected. You're not dependent on his validation to feel worthy. And the truth is, nothing confuses someone more than being rejected and then realizing they're the one who's losing something. That confusion, that shift, that only happens when you resist the urge to explain your worth and instead embody it in your absence. Your silence has now become a reminder of everything he underestimated. It lingers in the spaces where your voice used to be, where your energy used to show up. And every time he looks for you and doesn't find you there, that absence becomes the lesson. Don't underestimate the impact of what you didn't say. Sometimes silence is the loudest "I deserved better" you'll ever speak. When someone rejects you, they assume their words are the final chapter in the story. They think the moment they say, "I don't want this," you'll crumble, you'll chase, you'll plead for one more chance or some form of explanation. Because deep down, most people expect that their rejection brings them a sense of relief, a clean break, a fresh start. What they never anticipate is the silence that follows. Not silence filled with bitterness or manipulation, but the kind that holds quiet dignity, the kind that doesn't fight, the kind that simply walks away. And that silence, that stillness, it doesn't give them the closure they were hoping for. It creates something else entirely. It forces reflection. It invites discomfort. See, when you react loudly, they get to stay comfortable in their decision. They feel justified. Your pain affirms their choice. But when there's nothing, no message, no explanation, no reaction, it unsettles them. Because now they're left with an echo instead of an answer. And that echo starts to grow louder the more they sit with it. He may have told himself that letting you go was what he needed, that it was a mature decision, that maybe you weren't aligned, but your silence, your refusal to offer him emotional closure, makes him revisit every part of that logic. He starts remembering not just the parts of the relationship that were hard, but the moments he felt seen, valued, even safe with you. And suddenly, he can't just move on. Not because you made it hard, but because your lack of resistance challenged his entire perception of you, of the relationship, and of himself. You didn't fight, you didn't argue, you didn't try to make him feel wrong, you just let him go. And in doing that, you showed him something rare: emotional independence. And that is terrifying to someone who thought you needed him to feel complete. When you're silent, you're not giving him a reaction he can defend himself against. You're giving him space to sit with his own decision. And the longer he sits, the more it starts to haunt him. What most people forget is that silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've chosen not to waste your energy on someone who doesn't see your worth. That choice, calm, clear, and final, sends a far more powerful message than any dramatic confrontation ever could. It says, I don't need to make noise to prove I matter. And believe me, that message is received loud and clear. In the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, when there's no distraction left to drown it out, that's when your silence starts doing the talking. And what it says is simple. You made your choice. Now sit with it. You may not realize it yet, but every time you choose silence after a rejection, you're holding up a mirror, one he never expected to face. And it's not just a mirror of who you are. It's a mirror of who he was when he had you. And more importantly, who he failed to be. He's not just feeling your absence. He's being forced to confront the version of himself that had your attention, your effort, your love, and chose to let it go. When you stop showing up in his life, he starts noticing more than just the quiet. He notices the way the conversations feel duller without your perspective. The way compliments don't land the same because they're not coming from someone who saw him in a real, vulnerable light. He remembers how he felt with you, not just loved, but understood. And now that understanding is gone. That mirror you've left behind, it reflects everything he lost, not just you, but the man he was capable of being when he was around you. Because here's the truth. When someone has your energy consistently and carelessly, they stop seeing it clearly. Familiarity dulls appreciation, but silence, that sharp, intentional silence, restores clarity. It strips away the distractions and forces them to remember. Not fantasize, not invent, but remember. And memory can be a brutal teacher, especially when it shows them what they once had and can no longer access. That's why your silence is so powerful. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about refusing to remind him of what he chose to discard. You've taken away the emotional safety net he assumed would always be there. You're no longer available to reassure, to comfort, to remind him of who he was when he was with you. And without that reflection, he starts to feel lost, not because of what he rejected, but because of who he now sees himself becoming without your influence. He's not haunted by your words. He's haunted by the version of himself that only existed when you were there to reflect it. Your silence has made him realize that your love wasn't just something that benefited you, it made him better. And that realization, when it hits, doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like failure. He's looking into the mirror you left behind, and he doesn't like what he sees anymore. And while he's busy picking apart those reflections, you've already stepped forward into the next chapter of your life, quietly, gracefully, powerfully. And that's when it hits him hardest. The mirror is still there, but you're no longer in the reflection. There's something we're never taught enough growing up, that our worth doesn't need to be proven in the moments we feel rejected. It's natural when someone walks away to want to explain, to argue, to plead our case like we're on trial for why we deserved to be loved. But that instinct, that desperate noise we make in heartbreak, is often rooted in the fear that maybe we're not enough. So we overcompensate. We reach out, overanalyze, overgive. We want answers. We want validation. But here's the truth that cuts through all of that. True self-worth lives in stillness, not in struggle. It's in the quiet refusal to beg for what should have been freely given. It's in choosing not to fight for a place in someone's life when they've already made it clear they don't value that place anymore. That's the kind of self-worth that doesn't need to scream, it just stands. And when you stand like that, calm, still, steady, it's not weakness. It's strength at its highest form. It says, I know what I offer. I don't need to sell it to someone who's not buying. And what that does, without you even realizing it, is shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, the person who thought they had the upper hand starts to feel off balance because they were prepared for a version of you that would try harder, hold on tighter. But what they weren't ready for was a version of you that walked away with grace and didn't look back. A version that didn't need their closure or their clarity to move forward. That version is powerful. That version is magnetic because silence in those moments isn't passive, it's intentional. You're telling them without a single word, I am not for convincing. I am not for chasing. I am for choosing. And if you couldn't choose me, that's your loss to live with. That kind of presence doesn't need applause. It echoes on its own. And yes, maybe it's hard. Maybe everything in you wants to reach out to fix what feels broken. But every time you don't, every time you choose to sit in the discomfort instead of reacting, you build something unshakable inside yourself. You build proof. Proof that you didn't need to fight to be seen because you already know who you are. That's the kind of healing that doesn't come with words or explanations. It comes in the silence after rejection, when you choose to trust your own value more than someone else's opinion of it. It comes when you realize that your energy, your love, your presence, they are not things to be handed out to people who treat them like options. So, the next time you feel like proving your worth to someone who couldn't see it, remember, the most powerful move you'll ever make is the one where you stay still, stay quiet, and let your self-worth speak for you. Rejection has a way of making you feel powerless. In that moment, it's easy to believe that someone else holds all the control, that their decision defines your worth, and that walking away means losing everything. But that's not the whole picture, because what people don't often see is that rejection isn't the end, it's the opening move. And your response to that moment determines everything that happens next. Most people give their power away by reacting emotionally, by chasing, by staying available. But when you respond with silence and self-respect, you change the entire game. That's when the real shift begins. That's when you go from being the one who was rejected to becoming the one who's desired. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about becoming someone who values themselves enough not to stick around where they're not fully seen. You see, when someone pushes you away and expects you to linger, to hang on to their breadcrumbs, they're not just testing your patience, they're testing your self-worth. And when you choose to disappear quietly, you're showing them that your love isn't something that waits around to be appreciated. It was a gift they had, and now it's gone. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're protecting your peace. And here's where it gets interesting. The very thing that made them feel confident in letting you go, your presence, your consistency, your love, becomes the thing they miss when you stop giving it. They go from feeling certain to questioning everything. Why isn't she trying? Why hasn't she reached out? Did I make a mistake? Suddenly, the person who thought they had all the control starts to feel the weight of your absence. Because rejection felt like power until it was met with silence. And silence, that flips the script. Now they're not just missing you, they're craving what they once had constant access to. Your energy, your kindness, the way you made them feel seen and supported. Those things don't just vanish quietly, they leave an impression. And when you remove that presence from their life without making a scene, without demanding attention, that absence becomes louder than any confrontation ever could. The truth is, the shift in power doesn't happen the moment they reject you. It happens the moment you don't chase them after it. That's the turning point. Because you've shown them you're not someone who begs to be chosen, you are the choice. And anyone who can't see that doesn't get a second opportunity to. So while they're sitting there wondering why it feels like they lost something, trying to retrace steps that led them to this silence, you've already moved forward. Calm, grounded, whole. Because the most powerful transformation is the one where they finally see your value, but you've already realized it for yourself. There's something beautiful that happens when you allow silence to do its work, not just for the other person to reflect, but for you to rebuild. After rejection, most people rush to fill the quiet with noise. They jump into distractions, try to seek validation elsewhere, or chase closure from someone who already walked away. But when you resist that urge, when you sit in the stillness, you give yourself a gift that's far more valuable than any explanation. The chance to reconnect with who you are without the weight of proving it to someone else. It's in that silence that you begin to remember what you forgot while you were so busy trying to be enough for someone who couldn't see you clearly. You remember the version of yourself that existed before the fear, before the overthinking, before the ache of rejection. You begin to realize that your identity doesn't have to be shaped by the opinions or decisions of someone else. It never did. And the more time you spend with yourself in that quiet space, the more you begin to heal. Not through words or validation, but through self-awareness. The silence becomes your sanctuary. It's where you start putting pieces back together without needing an audience. And ironically, that's what makes you magnetic again, not to them, but to life. Because when you stop looking for someone else to define your value, you start building a life that reflects it instead. You grow stronger, not bitter, wiser, not colder. And with every passing day, the person who once felt like a loss starts to feel like a lesson. And here's the thing, they might come back. People often do when they feel the emptiness your absence created. But by then, the silence will have done its work. You won't be in the same place emotionally. You won't need to be wanted in order to feel worthy, because you'll have done something rare. You healed without needing to be rescued. That's the transformation rejection can never stop when you choose yourself. The silence wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the beginning of a relationship with yourself. that's rooted in truth, not fear. And as you rebuild in that space, you become someone even stronger than before. Someone who doesn't settle, someone who doesn't shrink, someone who realizes that the love they were chasing was always meant to start within. So let the silence stay a little longer. Let it guide you. Let it remind you that your power was never in what someone else gave you. It was in what you found when everything else fell quiet.